Hi, people. How are you doing today? I'm sitting here in very sunny Stockholm in the capital of Sweden and the largest city in Northern Europe at the moment. And it feels that the summer has kind of taken over the spring, so to say. And today I'm thinking a little bit extra about civilization and what does it mean and how it's used in discussions, especially like in political discussions and so on. Now, one book I want to present to you is called The Great War for Civilization, The Conquest of the Middle East by Robert Fisk. It's a very big book, as you can see it, like you could almost kill a person with it because it's like more than 1,000 pages. And it's a book that's really inspired me. I was reading it, I think maybe like something like 15 years ago when I was in Croatia during summertime, and I was basically reading only this book during the whole summer because it was so, how to say, mind-blowing. As a On my, let's say, personal level, I'm more of a kind of a freedom-loving, decentralizing person, so I'm very skeptic towards governments. And this book is very much about by Robert Fisk is very much about how governments are doing very bad things, and that we, as let's say people in general, are not always aware of or don't always understand, or sometimes we do know about it but we ignore it. So what Robert Fisk is writing about is kind of this rivalry and conflicts between nations, between governments around the world, partly in relation to colonialism, but also, like, say, the Cold War period. So he's writing about secret services like torturing people, killing people, sponsoring undemocratic behaviors, and so on. And the reason I'm presenting this book is because there are people both on the left and on the right, speaking in these terms of, let's say, imperialism um, and geopolitics and civilization, about China, Russia, Europe, America, and so on. Now, I find problems with both narratives, not like both, but like in different narratives on, let's say, general political left, general political right. So on the parts of the political left, you have the so-called anti-imperialist narrative that let's say what America did in Iraq and Afghanistan was bad, invasions, wars, um, how to say, geopolitical behaviors. But the problem there is that people who promote that narrative, they end up in this kind of a whataboutism, both sidism behavior. So they criticize, let's say, America, but then they support or apologize for Russia and China, for example, regarding now what's happening in Ukraine with the war. And then on the political right, or let's say on the collectivist right, you have this narrative about that this what's happening in Ukraine is a clash of civilizations, kind of Russian civilization against Western civilization, and then you have, I don't know, Islamic civilization and so on. But that narrative is wrong because there is no Western, Russian, European, Islamic, and so on civilization, because basically the whole world today is one global human civilization, very much thanks to, internet, globalization, technology, different ideas that have been spreading around. Because, for example, if you look on Russia and Ukraine, it's not a kind of a civilizational conflict or a war. It's a war of different political ideas. It's a, Ukraine is a young democracy, Russia is an old dictatorship. But also, let's say in Europe, you will, let's say European Union and America, you will find many people who even think that they are, let's say, Western, but they support authoritarianism, they support dictatorship. And also both Russia and Ukraine are, let's say, Slavic when it comes to cultural constructions, but there is no such thing as Slavic unity or Slavic civilization, because countries where you have, let's say, kind of Slavic languages, they don't always, let's say, people there don't always like each other. Like if you take, for example, Serbia and Croatia, or now as in Russia and China. So the point is that more of us around the world, we should not try to divide ourselves in some mythological constructs about different civilizations, but we should try to unite ourselves in shaping a common human civilization that's basically already existing. Of course, there are differences between, let's say, America and China, or the European Union and Russia and so on. But political ideas that are shaping our social reality, they are existing everywhere in the world. For example, China has a communist party. Communism is an idea that kind of developed in Europe, origin historically seen. And many people, like in the Middle East and North Africa, are fighting for democracy, regardless if they are, let's say, Muslims or not. So what I think we can learn from Robert Fisk is that as long as there is, let's say, nationalism, as long as there is this kind of geopolitical rivalry between people, between governments, between polities as nations and so on, our world is going to be very divided. And the way to kind of unite the world is to apply some kind of a global representative democracy, for example, by shaping a world parliament. Because one thing we know from, like, as I say, no, like in general humans now, but we can conclude from research, two things: is that democracy is a universal value, that it's possible to conduct democracy in different places around the world, and also that democracies, historically seen in general, don't go in wars against each other. You know, democracies, democratic societies, democratic, let's say, nations, or even larger units as the European Union, have the possibility to unite around common values, to establish institutions, to establish cooperation. And this is something we can do both locally and globally. So, what's happening now in Ukraine, as I say, it's not a civilizational war, it's not a civilizational conflict between, kind of a perception of there's like a Western and Russian civilization, but it's more a war taking place within, inside the human civilization, because the human civilization is still divided in democracies and dictatorships. And this is why I personally, despite all of the problems that I know are existing in Ukraine, like corruption and, let's say, institutional incompetence, and even like authoritarian behaviors, I support Ukraine because it is a young democracy. It's a democratic community. And if more, let's say, nations around the world can become democracies, it means that the whole world, planet that we are living on in general, is going to be democratic sooner or later. So these are the thoughts, ideas, arguments I wanted to present to you in this video. So thank you very much for watching, and for you who are, let's say, on YouTube, please follow my channel, and I will add some additional information there. Have a nice day.